I don't think I need to explain to you who Bradley Cooper is. He's one of the most famous actors working in Hollywood today, and let's be honest, he's pretty good at it. I haven't ever seen a Bradley Cooper performance that I've actively disliked, although he has been in movies that I've disliked, but we'll get there. And I bet that if you ask the average person how many Oscars Bradley Cooper has, either for acting or for directing, they'd probably say at least one. The way that most people think that Samuel L. Jackson has an Oscar, or Jake Gyllenhaal, or Willem Dafoe. Dear God, somebody please give Willem Dafoe a goddamn Oscar. Anyway, if you haven't been keeping up with the Oscar race over the last few years, you might be surprised to learn that Bradley Cooper has never won one. And nobody is more sad about that fact than Bradley Cooper.
I was surprised, I gotta admit, that you were not nominated for Best Director.
Oh, thank you.
Were you surprised by that, disappointed by that, or did you just take it in stride?
I was not surprised.
You were not?
I'm never surprised about not getting anything. But I did feel, and it's funny you asked it because I have thought about this, because I was with my friend, I was in New York City at a coffee shop, and I looked down at my phone, and Nicole had texted me, and they said, congratulations on these other things, but they didn't tell me the bad news.
Yes.
And I went, oh, wow. And the first thing I felt was embarrassment, actually.
Sophie's Choice for 2024. You win the Oscar, not only for Best Director, but Best Actor, and Carey Mulligan wins Best Actress. Or the Eagles have a Super Bowl victory. What
Eagles
do you
Super
choose?
Bowl victory.
What?
Wow.
What?
Eagles. I know.
You're lying
I'm
now,
sick.
aren't you?
And I guess I'm joking around a little bit here. He's clearly not that outwardly bitter about it. And you also might be saying, well, he should be upset that he hasn't won an Academy Award. He's overcome a lot in his personal life, he's well respected by many of his peers, and he has a pretty impressive body of work. He has every right to feel whatever way he feels about it. And yes, he does, but when it comes to award season, narratives are everything. And this year, his Oscar campaign for his newest movie, Maestro, which he wrote and directed, is not exactly doing him any favors in the public court of opinion. And we'll get there, but first, let's take a quick trip down memory lane.
I thought, oh, Richie DeMaso's gonna stay in the office. I'm outside on the field. I got people working for me. My ideas. I'm running the show. I'm the quarterback, and I'm not gonna settle.
What happened to Tommy?
He died.
How'd he die?
Please, don't bring it up.
Hey, Tiffany. This is Pat. You look nice.
Thank you.
How'd Tommy die?
Bradley Cooper got his first two acting nominations for two films directed by David O. Russell, a director who I despised long before all of the horrible shit came out about him. I mean, I haven't seen Silver Linings Playbook in a long time, but I do remember liking it well enough, but goddamn, I hated American Hustle. That movie is absolute dog shit. Fuck David O. Russell for so many reasons, but also, he personally owes me like $15 for all of the money that I wasted going to see that shit in theaters. It was terrible. But those were Cooper's first two times in Oscar contention, and the narrative back then was that he had plenty of time to win one, and plenty of opportunities to work in more prestige projects with different directors, and that was definitely the case with his role in the 2015 film American Sniper.
I got a military-age male on a cell phone watching the convoy over.
If you think he's reporting troop movement, you have a green light. Your call, over.
Maybe he's just calling his old lady.
He stepped off.
American Sniper was one of those weird movies that made the entire Oscar race unusually political that year. I remember around that time there was a big movement of dumbasses online who insisted that not rooting for this film to win was inherently un-American just because it's based on the story of an American Navy SEAL named Chris Kyle, and it was directed by Clint Eastwood, and in their eyes that meant we all had to constantly suck it off as a great achievement of American cinema because patriotism, I guess. Even though the film has been widely criticized for its historical inaccuracies, its mischaracterization about the war in Iraq, and the weird-looking prop baby. American Sniper was one of those late-in-the-game Oscar pushes because it made a shit ton of money, and it was seen as more of a consumer-friendly underdog back when that kind of narrative still mattered for the Oscars. And let's be honest, I don't think there was any way Cooper was going to win anything for this just because of how polarizing it was at the time, and he came away mostly unscathed for it because it's pretty well understood that his portrayal of Chris Kyle, divorced from the abhorrent alternate reality that the movie takes place in, is pretty solid, but okay. Back to the drawing board. One more time. Let's go.
Maybe it's time to let the old ways die.
So this is the first movie that Bradley Cooper has been nominated for that I have actually really enjoyed. It's also, up until this point, the most Oscar baity movie that he has not only starred in, but also directed. A Star is Born has had 2 previous iterations before it was remade in 2018 with Bradley Cooper and Lady Gaga, with Bradley Cooper, of course, starring in the film and sitting in the director's chair as well. Cooper was nominated for an Oscar for his portrayal of the character Jackson Maine, but was notably snubbed for Best Director, which shocked a lot of people following the race around that time. A lot of people speculated that this was because members of the Academy don't really like when actors direct the films that they're in. Looking back through the history of the Oscars, it has been possible for actors who directed to get nominated for both. This has happened to Clint Eastwood multiple times, for example, but to my knowledge, an actor has never won for both, and double nominations for both categories are generally speaking pretty rare. Do I think he should have won for Best Director in 2019? No, I guess not, but I guess I could have also argued for a nomination to be given that this wasn't a particularly crowded field in that particular year, and I absolutely think that if we're talking like pound for pound Best Actor, he definitely could have won over Rami Malek that year, because literally anyone could have won over Rami Malek. God damn. I can't go into like the level of contempt I have had for Bohemian Rhapsody since that movie came out, but that's another rant for another day. Anyway, that brings us to this year's Oscar race, where Bradley Cooper is once again making his return as both an actor and director for the biopic Maestro, a film chronicling the life of famed conductor Leonard Bernstein. Although, to be fair, if you ask the cast and pretty much anyone involved with like the editorial of the film, they don't classify it as a biopic. Carey Mulligan, for example, has routinely said that it is a love story. But like, I don't know, it is a film depicting the life of a famous person who did at one time walk this earth, so I'm gonna say it's a biopic. A lot of people online have been categorizing Maestro as like primo Oscar bait, and I do want to acknowledge the fact that the term Oscar bait is pretty subjective. Hi, post-production Kayla cutting in here to briefly say that I'm about to talk about what Oscar bait is in the next section of this video, and what I refuse to do is insert clips of films that I personally think are Oscar bait, because the last thing I need is 10 million comments being like, what do you mean that movie's Oscar bait? That movie's not Oscar bait, it's a brilliant whatever. I'm over it, so what we're gonna do instead is I'm gonna insert B-roll of we fishing. Get it? Fishing. Bait. Anyway, let's continue. If you were unfamiliar with that saying, it usually is a term ascribed to a movie that seems to have been made with the express purpose of doing well at the Academy Awards. There have been plenty of films that fall into the modern day Oscar bait genre, but a lot of the times they're either biopics or they're self-serious period dramas. Usually they feature a lot of like heavy set elements, a lot of big name actors. But Oscar bait is kind of a moving target based on the overall public perception of a movie. For example, I totally think that if the Barbenheimer phenomenon hadn't happened, Oppenheimer probably would have been considered Oscar bait. And I'm saying that as someone who is a big fan of Christopher Nolan, and I'm happy Oppenheimer made the amount of money they did. I'm glad the whole Barbenheimer discourse got a lot of people out to go see both movies. I'm very happy all of that happened. I just think that had that not happened, people would have been quicker to shit on Oppenheimer for like trying to win Christopher Nolan a Best Director award. So okay, now that we've established what Oscar bait is, let's talk about Maestro, its perception, and how it came to be, and why some people think that it is fitting into this category and backfiring on Bradley Cooper a little bit. Okay, so it's important to note that this project has been in development since around 2017. Initially, Martin Scorsese was going to direct it, but he stepped down from the project to go complete The Irishman. Then apparently Steven Spielberg was going to direct it, but ended up handing the reins to Cooper after seeing A Star is Born, and both Spielberg and Scorsese ended up staying on as producers of the film. As far as what drew Bradley Cooper so strongly to this project, I'll let him tell it.
And he talked to me about potentially acting in it. Just acting in it. Because he knew how much I loved conducting since I was a kid.
Yeah.
Obsessed with it.
How did you get into conducting as a kid?
I mean, when I say conducting, play conducting. Like, you know.
No, I know, but why? What was
Tom
it?
and Jerry, you know, Bugs Bunny, you know.
So it was like cartoon conducting. You thought that was so
well,
cool.
that's where I was like, oh, well, you can do this and like the sound comes out.
Yeah.
You know? And then I asked Santa Claus for a baton when I was like just around 8 years old. And then I would just conduct all the time because there was classical music playing in my house. We had a record player in the living room. And I used to always just sit in the living room and just start to conduct whatever the music was. And then I started to have favorite pieces of music, and I would ask my dad to get CDs of that. And so I would spend hours and hours. And then in grad school, Leonard Bernstein came and did a workshop with us. and we had to like create a character, and I wrote a monologue about a conductor. So I was like, this conductor.
Oh my God,
has
it was
always
really
been,
in you.
like a huge part of me, and I knew that somewhere in me, I thought, gosh, I've done so much work on like believing I'm a conductor.
Yeah.
That if I ever had the chance to play one, there's years and years of like rehearsal inside of me.
And lo and behold, Bradley Cooper did then get the chance to play a famous conductor by the name of Leonard Bernstein. It almost seems too good to be true, so much so that people have been speculating that this is Cap. I go back and forth on it just because I feel like parts of that story that he's telling to Emma Stone are almost too specific for him to be capping. But you know, outside of this one anecdote that could be interpreted as a genuine experience that he had, he's been doing a lot of the typical Oscar campaign interview route stuff where he's explained his process of like really getting into the character. He at one point explains to Emma Stone in that Actors on Actors interview that he was so in character that he was like literally playing Leonard Bernstein while he was directing, like he was in character like until they wrapped for the day. He also has been telling this story that's been making the rounds on the internet about how he took 6 years to basically learn how to actually conduct. Because in the movie, there's this big sort of one-take scene where Bradley Cooper as Leonard Bernstein conducts a full orchestra for 6 minutes straight, and from what I understand, there's no cutaways, it's pretty much all just one take. And so the whole thing was that he wanted to be able to do that with a live orchestra, which meant that he literally needed to learn how to conduct, which is a pretty complex skill. Although him telling this story over and over in a lot of the different press junkets and stuff like that has been interpreted by some people as almost like very try-hard behavior, like, oh god, he's really campaigning for this Oscar. He spent 6 years learning how to do a new skill just for this one role. And people have also sort of, you know, been juxtaposing what Bradley Cooper has been saying about his method in order to get into character for this role with what Cillian Murphy did to get into character for Oppenheimer. And for those who don't know Cillian Murphy, he just has like a much more laid-back approach to not only acting but also like life in general. He's kind of just naturally a low-key guy, and whether or not that whole persona is intentional, people just really take kindly to his demeanor and kind of always have. And they're really rooting for him to get this Oscar, and that makes sense because Cillian's a fantastic actor and a lot of people view it as like a long overdue thing. But because so many people are rooting for Cillian in this Oscar race, I feel like it's almost produced this sort of manufactured rivalry where Bradley Cooper in the narrative has become like the establishment villain. For example, it's pretty well known that Cillian Murphy had about 6 months to prepare for the role of Oppenheimer as opposed to Bradley Cooper, who practiced the art of conducting for 6 years in preparation for this role. Just two very different styles of like approaching a character. And then Bradley Cooper made this comment in the Actors on Actors video with Emma Stone that I'll play for you in a second that people I think kind of took out of context and misinterpreted as him throwing shade at Cillian Murphy. I don't think it was deliberate, if I'm gonna be honest with you, but like that's kind of what kicked off this whole like rivalry online, I think.
This wasn't like you got a call and then you're gonna do it.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
like this had to have taken years.
I think another narrative that's working against Bradley Cooper right now a little bit is Iron Claw. If you haven't seen Iron Claw, it's absolutely fantastic, one of my favorite movies of the year, but Zac Efron in particular is getting a lot of praise for his portrayal of Kevin Von Erich. It's sort of become like a late-stage underdog pick for the Oscar race this year, and people online are suggesting that like he should get in for a Best Actor nomination over Bradley Cooper, as if Bradley Cooper himself is the direct reason why Zac Efron is not going to get a nomination for Iron Claw, which if you are not familiar, this is not how this kind of thing works. If Zac Efron doesn't get a nomination, it's because A24 kind of fucked up the distribution of Iron Claw to the point that like the movie came out too late and a lot of Academy members had already voted before seeing his performance. Also, unfortunately, Maestro just had the luck of coming out in a really stacked year for movies. This is one of the best years for movies like that I have seen in a very long time. Had this come out in any other year, I feel like the whole project would have been perceived a little bit more favorably. Also, we're all just completely ignoring the fact that like Paul Giamatti could just come out of nowhere with like the underdog swoop for The Holdovers, and honestly, I hope he does. That was my favorite movie of the year. But the last thing I want to mention about Maestro is the sort of tangible controversy that has come from this film so far. Basically, Bradley Cooper was in heavy makeup for a lot of different stages in this movie to portray, the stages of Leonard Bernstein's life. And when images from the movie first released, a lot of people noticed that Bradley Cooper was wearing a prosthetic nose, which was interpreted by some to be anti-Semitic, as Leonard Bernstein is Jewish. And also people felt that it was just like an unnecessary addition to like the transformational aspect of the character. However, it is worth noting that the children of Leonard Bernstein, who worked closely with Bradley Cooper on this film, rushed to defend him after this controversy, saying that the use of the prosthetic nose and the makeup was just a method for Bradley Cooper to get into character to more accurately portray their father. But I don't know, to me personally, it looks a little unnecessary if you look at the pictures of both of them side by side. And I think this kind of added to the overall narrative that Bradley Cooper's whole involvement in this movie is just a vanity project, in which he can lose himself in the iconography of a character just to pull out the Oscar win. And I do feel a little bad after putting all of this together, because from all the research that I've done, Bradley Cooper just seems like a guy who is genuinely very passionate about his craft and about acting and about making movies. And I feel like a lot of the anecdotes that he shared about the making of Maestro on this press junket and during his Oscar campaign were things that he was legitimately excited to share and talk about. But because of like the year that Maestro came out in and all of the other movies that it's up against, all of the other actors that he's up against, the fact that this kind of biopic is definitely being perceived in this day and age as like the most traditional form of Oscar bait, it's all really just working against him. That's all for me today, you guys. Let me know who you would like to see win Best Picture at the Oscars this year. It is a stacked year. I personally think Oppenheimer is going to win, but like, again, the underdog, you know, in me is kind of rooting for the holdovers just because I love that movie so much. But let me know what your favorite performances are. Let's just talk about the movies in the comments, you know? Let's talk about our favorite performances of the year, because there were a lot of good ones. Thanks so much, you guys, and I'll see you next time.